Hey everybody, my name's Kristopher Triana. I'm a horror author. You might know me as the author of Gone to See the Riverman or Full Brutal or several other scary books. I'm here today to celebrate the grand birth of Sadie Hartman, also known as Mother Horror. She is your host on this fabulous event, Celebrate Horror 2021. I'm very happy to be here and to be a part of it. I'm going to be reading from one of my latest books. This has been a popular one for me. It's called The 13th Coyote, and it's part of the Splatter Western series from Death's Head Press. This is my longest book so far. As you can see, it's kind of a chunker there. And I'm happy to say that people have really responded to it well. And that's good because there is a sequel coming out this summer. It's titled Ballad of the Were-Vixens. So those of you who enjoyed the 13th Coyote, be looking for that this summer. Now, the book is, as you can see, it's got the wolf on the cover. You got, some cowboys and a nun and a corpse in there. So this is a horror western that's actually about werewolves in the Wild West. The werewolves that are called the Coyotes are kind of like this roaming band of outlaws who are the most vicious and evil in the West. And they're searching for a sort of talisman called the Menhar. And that's the basics of what they're after. Of course, the book is much more involved than just that brief summary. But anyway, you can definitely check it out. It's available wherever books are sold. And I'm going to read to you today. This is from chapter 2. This is where we first meet the coyotes that I mentioned. Glenn could smell the corpse a mile over the ridge. The blood still held moisture, filling the air with the rich fragrances of copper and salt. His pale flesh quivered. It was a familiar odor to him, one that had burned in his nostrils since boyhood. He called the Mexican Secession home then, long before his life in the saddle. Then, like now, the smell of blood made his mouth water. The leg of the bank teller he'd killed in Pope's Rock had begun to spoil, the meat decaying to the point of being nearly inedible. It had kept the pack full as they rode through these mountains, but now they needed fresh meat. He'd been hoping for another kill, but sometimes scavenging would have to do. He gathered the reins, clacked them. "Yah!" Belial rocked between his thighs, the young Mustang charged by the same excitement as its master. The men followed, smart enough not to ask questions as their leader ventured off the trail and across the rocky terrain. His spurs of bone clattered, and the bullwhip at his side flapped against his thigh. Pebbles crackled like kindling of flame beneath the hooves of the 5 horses, serenading the black rise of evening, and a cold wind made whispers through trees growing from out of the stones in gnarled, defiant coils. When the riders rose to the crest, Glenn scanned the valley basin below. He spit tobacco and waited for his night vision to kick in. Redness brewed in his eyes. "There," he said, sniffing out the body more than seeing it. The pack trotted forward. A screeching above them caused Glenn and Hiram to turn their heads to the sky. The Buzzard spun alone in the twilight, his brethren feasting somewhere below. Glenn loathed these filthy creatures. It was simple instinct to detest any competition for food. Being the fastest draw of the gang, Hiram drew his iron and blasted the Buzzard off its orbit, sending it tumbling to the earth as the rest of the flock fled into the sky, spooked by the crack of the silver-plated revolver. As they filled the air, Glenn's men drew their pistols, Dillon, Thad, and Webb joining Hiram in the sport of bird slaughter. Unless they were ravens, the men had no love for winged creatures. Feathers left the Buzzard's bodies as bones snapped and blood spurted. Hiram smirked. "Only thing they's good for." The riders holstered their weapons and moved on. They found the dead man's body tucked behind an assortment of boulders. He was naked and face down in the dirt and pebbles, a spattering of blood about his head like an Indian headdress. The Buzzards had picked his back and buttocks apart. Now the flies were having at him. Hiram dismounted and crouched beside the body. "He's been scalped. Must have crossed the wrong chief." Dylan swung down from his horse's back. The youngest of the company, Dylan Booty, seemed to fly in and out of the saddle. He lifted the brim of his Stetson and wiped his brow with the back of his glove. "Reckon it's the Shoshone?" he asked. Glenn shook his head. "Doubtful. That tribe's too friendly to white men." Webb laughed, his brown face like granite. "That's mighty foolish if you ask me, an Indian trusting a white." "If this sucker crossed an Injun," Dylan said, "I don't care what tribe they are. They'd do him in just like this. They're all savages." Glenn shook his head again, marveling at the irony of Dylan's musings. Just 2 days prior, Dylan had raped a schoolgirl, no older than 14 by the smell of her. He broke her arm so she couldn't even try to bat him off, and once he'd satisfied his carnal desires, he vivisected her heart and bit into it, sucking down the blood while it was still hot. Yet here he was, calling Indians savage. "They must have robbed him," Hiram said. "Took his clothes on top of his greenbacks, and whatever else he had." "How long?" Glenn asked. "How long what, boss?" Glenn glowered. "How long has he been dead, Hiram?" His second-in-command gulped, realizing he was trying the pack leader's patience. It'd been a long, hard road, and Glenn wasn't as young as he used to be. He was saddle-sore, and the hide on his Mustang's back was wearing down. "I'm sorry, boss." Hiram leaned in closer to the corpse, taking a good sniff. He lifted his head in both hands. He lifted the head in both hands and lapped at the exposed skull. "Shit. Can't be more than an hour." Dylan drew his iron and glanced around the plains. "Goddamn Injuns could still be here." "Nah," Hiram said. "They's gone. Simmer down." "And end up scalped like this sumbitch?" Glenn silenced them both with a mere rising of his hand. He dismounted Belial and removed his hat, releasing a long shock of black hair. He approached the body, and Hiram got out of his way. The pack leader used one foot to turn the dead man over, and then spat the wad of used tobacco into his face. He opened his coat, bypassing the pistol slung at his hip, and reached into the hidden pocket. The steel of the Chris dagger's handle was cold to the touch, an arctic sensation so bitter it would burn the flesh of a normal man. But thick blackened calluses protected Glenn's palms. He drew it from his coat and gazed upon the blade. It was curved back and forth like a snake slithering through desert sands. Where the blade met the handle was an inverted pentagram of fire opal, the same blood red as the eyes of Glen Amarok, the exalted commander of the Coyotes. The blade entered the dead man just beneath the ribs, preparing the carcass for evisceration. Glenn tended to discard the guts in favor of the steaks and chops. Hiram, however, was more ghoulish. Glenn removed the liver and tossed it to his sidekick. Hiram devoured it almost instantly. Being the cookie, Webb set himself to gathering kindling for a fire to cook with. The other men gathered around, awaiting their portions, whatever pieces Glenn would toss to them once he'd chosen his own. When times were hard, they had to settle for his scraps, but tonight there was enough to fill all their bellies. "This'll hold us over," Glenn said, "until we get to Broken Ridge. We'll hit their bank and snatch us some whores for breakfast." He pulled a free strand of meat the size and consistency of a strip of hog fat. He rolled it around his finger and bit into it, thinking of the territory and the small town that lay somewhere within it, hidden deep within those azure mountains. It wouldn't stay hidden very long, not with the Coyotes closing in. And that is from The 13th Koyote, my current Western. That was my first release this year. The second one, my newest book right now, is called The Night Stalkers, an extreme horror splatter comedy that I wrote with fellow author Ryan Harding. So you can check that out too. And again, I have more stuff coming out later this year, so be on the lookout for that. Thanks again, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed the reading and my little video. And happy birthday once again to Sadie. Thanks, everybody. Bye.